Dan, group of riders ready for the training day. What's first on the agenda?
We're going to start at basic bike setup. Some of the things that can be the crux of doing a day like this. I mean, you can spend most of the day messing about, and if you haven't got the basic stuff like tyre pressures right, you're up against it right from the word go. So from the word go this time, we're doing the bike setup.
Okay, we've got a large scale tyre pressure gauge. What are you running the tyres at?
Right, between 4 and 5 psi in the back tyre, and between 6 and 7 in the front. That's adult pressures. I mean, child's slightly lower, but what you want to see is when you're riding, the tyres flexing. You don't want to be seeing it rock hard.
Okay, we're moving up to the handlebar area now. What are you doing at this point?
Just checking the controls are all working, springing back. Throttle, very important, need to make sure it's shutting off. We're just looking at the line from your arms right down past your hand into your levers. You're on a nice comfortable position, not something that's unnatural. And
position of the bars there, I presume, is what we're looking at?
Yeah, fairly straight, a little bit forward. I mean, not too forward, because obviously that has a big impact on where your weight's distributed onto the bike.
And at that point you're showing obviously that you don't want that bent wrist too much, presumably.
That's right. I mean, it might be alright after 5 minutes, but after an hour you might start to find that your wrist's really hurting, so you want a nice relaxed stance on the bike. And also the levers, they need to be able to move if you have a crash, so it doesn't break anything, but obviously not too loose that it's all floppy. We're looking at handlebar grips now. You notice mine are actually wired on with lock wire as well as being stuck on. Very important. You've got a lot of force coming through your arms as you're pulling on the handlebars. You don't want the grip to come off in your hand, because the bike will then shoot off without you.
Oh, footrest, something probably we forget about a lot.
Very, very important this. All your weight is going through the footrest, so you need at least a 90-degree angle there, right angle, if not pointing up, so if you hit something they fold up. Certainly not pointing down so your feet can slip off. Chain tension, not too tight, not too slack. I set mine just so I can get my finger between the tensioner block and the swinging arm.
Oh, back to the footrest now. This is what you don't want.
Now, this bike's quite old, it's had a lot of use. You see the footrests, it's sloping down a little bit, but it's also smooth at the front. You need to make sure it's spiky so it grips your foot and actually points up a little bit as well.
No use having the best boots in the world if your footrests are no good.
No, exactly.
What are you doing here, Dan?
Just checking for any play in the wheel bearings. I mean, this is more a maintenance check than your bike setup, but it's very important. That's the wheel bearings we're just pointing to there. You don't want your back wheel to collapse.
So you're looking for that sideways movement there.
That's right. So we've got the essentials of clothing here. We've got helmet, boots and gloves. They're the main things. They're the main things that you're going to be banging, that need to protect. Anything else, it's up to you, but we really need helmet, boots and gloves.
Okay, well, we're moving on then to basic riding position and stance. And here you are with one of the riders. What are you showing here?
Well, I'm just leaning the bike from side to side and showing how George needs to counterbalance to keep the bike stable. As you're turning, you want to lean the bike into the turn, so it's up to you to get to the other side of the bike and counterbalance it. So, showing how when he moves his weight to the back, all his weight is going through that back wheel now. It's helping it grip, and it's keeping the front end light as well. And then it'll lean forward now, all the weight's transferred to the front end, which makes the back wheel light. A lot of errors occur because you move your weight forward like this and make the back wheel light and it'll start to spin. But also it's heavy on the front end because your weight's on it, it wants to tuck under and stuff like that. So that's the nice relaxed riding position. We'll start off just riding slowly. Get used to riding slowly, it's very important. So your balance plays a big part in this, but you need to be able to ride as slow as you possibly can.
So this is a combination of clutch and throttle control?
That's right, yes. I mean, you can start off just using the throttle, but the better you get, you start covering your clutch as well. I'm just showing here about when you're turning. And a lot of riders, they think a tight turn, you just have to turn your handlebars a bit. You turn it right until they stop, onto the lock stop, and that's your full turn. You need to be able to get comfortable so as you're riding along you can turn and put it on full lock. I'm just showing here that we've got fairly strong arms when a weight's back. If you move the weight forward, all of a sudden your arms aren't as strong. So you can see we're turning. George has got his left leg out so he can put his weight across from his right foot and just counterbalance. Turn the other way, and his weight's now on his left foot and his right leg is bent so he can just get that counterbalance. So we've got Joel here riding at walking pace. Notice his right foot is just touching the brake, so he's covering the clutch and just touching the back brake a little bit to keep him slowing down. Nice speed that, well done. Slightly different, we've got Jordan. You notice his right foot's nowhere near the back brake. This time he's got his finger on the front brake. It's whatever suits you, whatever makes you comfortable. I mean, obviously the ideal combination is all three. You've got your back brake, front brake and your clutch. Which is what Richard's doing now. You can see he's going really slowly, but he's also quite smooth as well. It's very good very good and handy to get used to riding slow.
Okay, let's throw something a little bit into the mix with in and out of the cone slalom.
You can see Katie here, she's really exaggerating the body lean. The bike's leant in, her right leg's bent, and she's letting her weight transfer from foot to foot as the bike transfers from side to side.
So we can see from that picture exactly what you were getting at with George a few minutes earlier.
Yes, that's right. And once again, Joel's got quite a wide stance, the legs are quite wide apart, but you can see he's still doing the transfer of the weight from side to side. We've got Richard coming towards us now. He's not using the clutch at all, so this is an exercise you can use without the clutch. It's very important to be able to do stuff without the clutch, because sometimes you can be doing a section, you can be trying it and not getting it and not know what's happening, and when actually the answer is that you're on the clutch too much. Let the bike do the work.
Well, we've gone from a slalom to a slightly different configuration of your cones here.
Yeah, it just makes you think a little bit more about what you're doing rather than just going left and right, left and right. We've got a few little turns and a few slightly bigger turns as well. Same principles though, we're letting the bike lean into the corner and we're counterbalancing, moving our weight from one foot to the other. One thing I haven't mentioned is anything about gears at this point as well. I think for most of the stuff that we're covering on this DVD, I think first gear is fine. There's one section with a long rocky section that I think maybe might be second gear, but everything else is pretty much first gear. The golden rule I use with gear selection when I'm training is first gear people tend to get the corners right, whereas if they start using second gear because maybe there's a hill at the end of the section, they start struggling with the corners. I'm wanting to focus on the corners and get the turns right. Once again we can see Richard here not touching his clutch, doesn't need to, letting the bike do the work. I mean, he is riding a 4-stroke here, so he's got that added luxury of a bit more engine braking, so it's probably easier for him to do something like this.
Back to a slalom, but you've tightened the cones up considerably, so less than a bike length between them.
That's right, so obviously we've increased the severity as well. They're slightly tighter, you've got a lot more work to do. I mean, while you're getting the first couple right, everything's nice, but as soon as you make one tiny mistake, you don't just make it on the next one, it carries on to the one after that and the one after that. So it's really up to you, it's how you improve, you make it harder for yourself. Now one thing I've noticed with Jordan's riding stance, I think I just told him at that point, is he does ride with his knees fairly close together, which a lot of the time it means his legs are fairly straight. If you look compared to what Joel was doing earlier on, you can see his legs aren't moving that much. On something like this, perhaps not that important, but later on it does start costing him. You see Katie's knees aren't quite as close together, so she's already got more range of movement. And what we're doing now, we're doing a figure of 8, really tight. It's almost on full lock. So we've got Joel straight through the cones and right onto the steering lock, ever so gentle, just on his clutch, just basically letting the bike creep forward, right on the biting point of the clutch and on full lock as well, straightening up and then back onto the next lock. See if you can notice how Jordan's legs are slightly straighter, slightly stiffer. And what I'm just showing here is if you're doing a section where you've got a tight turn like this and you get it wrong, you put the foot down to the side that you're getting wrong. So if he's doing a left turn like that, if he puts his left foot down, he can pull the bike towards him, because the minute he takes his foot off and puts it on the floor, it pulls the bike into the turn. And we've finally got him just starting to bend his leg there. Notice how as soon as Richard dabbed to the right, he pulled the bike to the right, dabbed to the left, pulls it to the left. So there the bike's leaning left and wants to go around the corner. Whereas if he starts dabbing to the right, I think I'm struggling to tell him what to do here. You can see now the bike started leaning right, and that's the way it wants to go. It sounds fairly straightforward, but you wouldn't believe how many riders, and I'll include myself in this, you put one foot down because you need it, then all of a sudden you realise, perhaps you should have put the other foot down. So instead of having a 1, it suddenly becomes a 2 or even more. So you can see, as he's dabbing to his left, pulling the bike in to the left, perfect. He's making as much use as possible of that 1 as well. It's not just down on the floor then straight back up again. You can see from a better angle, so the dab on the right side of the correct side of the bike, and then the dab on the wrong side of the bike, and it pulls the bike out of the where you want to go. Right, here we go, wheelies. A lot of the young lads love doing this bit. So it's weight forward to compress the front end, and then as we lean back, we pull on the front end and give it a little bit of throttle. 2 ways of doing it. You can do it just using the throttle, like that, or you can also give it a little blip with your clutch. So the clutch comes in, throttle goes on, clutch goes out again. So it's weight forward, and then move your weight as far back as you can to make the front end light. You can see that it didn't put that much effort into it. It was simply the body movement actually picked the front wheel up a little bit, and that's without any engine. So now we can try it with the engine. So obviously it helps, it takes a lot of the effort out. Push down, pull up, a little bit of power on. Now we're just lifting the front wheel a foot or so, nothing more. We don't want, an Evel Knievel wheelie. It's just enough to get over some of the obstacles that we'll be doing later on. So it's just weight forward, weight back, pull up, power on, and knock it off again. So we're just using this on the throttle at the minute. So as soon as you shut off, it's not big enough to carry on going. As soon as you shut off, the front wheel will drop. If you start getting bigger, that's when you might needing the clutch to, dip the front wheel. But at the minute, we're just doing this on the throttle. You see, he's not touching his clutch at all. Just do it using the throttle. Right, once we've got it all sorted on a nice flat area, we'll go to a slightly bumpier area. Similar sort of exercises. We've replaced the cones with concrete blocks. But once again, it's just like going in and out of the cones. The only difference is the terrain's slightly bumpier. So your arms and legs, we've got them bent already, we had that done earlier, but now they're also acting as shock absorbers as well as the suspension on your bike. Nice and smooth with that throttle, and you shouldn't have any problems with the front end sliding out or the back wheel spinning. Weight's fairly back, as you can see with Joel there. Nice and smooth with the throttle. So something that we haven't mentioned is what your head's doing at this point. You want to be looking not directly at your front wheel, slightly further in front of that, so that you can see where you're going, so you can plan. Richard's head was fairly low down there, and he found himself short of room just coming up to the concrete block. So if he'd have looked up a little bit earlier, he could have all of a sudden made it tighter, so we can get further away from the block to give himself more room. I think Jordan's going to demonstrate that for us now.
It was also noticeable that Richard had to put a lot more body movement in to recover the position, didn't
That's right, so as soon as he realised he was wrong, he had to put a lot of work in. Jordan did his work earlier, so he didn't have any problems with that. And he's got his legs bending.
For this sort of exercise, you're right in the centre of the machine, not too far forward or back?
I like to stay a little bit back. You don't want any weight on the front wheel, because that's when things can start going wrong. It's always good to have your weight further back, so if you're hitting obstacles, your front wheel is more inclined to just go over it rather than be stopped by them. Right, what we've got now, we're trying to do a full lock turn as tight as what we can possibly do, and it's really uneven ground, so it makes it more awkward, so we're trying to counterbalance with our body but at the same time absorbing any bumps. You can see George is doing a fairly good job here, but he's not quite on full lock. So this is really good, but we just want a slight improvement, the tighter turn. So the better George gets, the tighter this circle will become.
And he's just using clutch and front brake, isn't he? He's not using the back brake at all there.
That's right. I mean, you could use the back brake if you want. I think I'll be using both here. You can see one finger clutch, one finger brake, and just touching every now and again the back brake. This is me on full lock. A little bit of a moment there, keeping it going. And the more you do it, you can just start to see that the wheels are making tracks, so you can keep following them and try and stay on them, just to tell you whether or not you're doing a tight enough turn.
And the back wheel's making a perfect circle there.
You notice I'm taking extra special care of my power delivery as well. The back wheel hasn't spun until that point, so what I did there, the weight moved forward a little bit, I'm on full lock, and as I put the power on, because I was off balance, it just went straight on. We've got to get weight back off the bike and be nice and gentle with the power delivery. So my left foot here is taking all the weight of my bike. I'm hugging the side of the bike with my left foot, it's rubbing right against it, and the right foot's nice and light. So once you've gone dizzy and you've recovered, you can then make this slightly more difficult by putting a couple of rocks, and they don't have to be big, but what you're aiming for now is to keep your turn whilst going over the rocks. So you can see I'm pushing down on the suspension before it, and then I'm just lifting up to take all the weight off the front wheel so it just rides straight over it. So I'm compressing, pulling up. Well, not then, I didn't get that one right. I was too heavy with the front and it stopped me. See how easy it is to stop you. So we'll try again, get it going. So push down, pull up and help it over. And all this time I've kept it on full lock. Now, funny little story about this. Obviously, once we finished filming this little bit and we were doing something else, a couple of the other guys went back and tried practicing that, and they were surprised how difficult it was. It's something that definitely comes the more and more you practice it, but obviously remember to go the other way every once in a while, otherwise you'll start falling over.
Okay, we're just going for, looks like a slow ride, but over some rocky territory here.
Yes, we've gone back to riding slow, like we were doing on the tarmac, but obviously slightly more difficult now because we've got some rocks. What I've got Joel doing here is going slower than he normally does, because you tend to find that you find your own speed through a section. So I've got him riding slow, all of a sudden he's having to do a lot of work. Front wheel doesn't want to stay straight, we've got Jordan moving backwards and forwards, left and right, and it's hard work. If you just pick up the speed a tiny little bit, you'll find that you will skip across all the rocks and it keeps straight easier. So now we moved on to slightly faster speed. I tried to get Katie going faster than she normally would, but that's not actually too bad a speed for this, but it's better demonstrated with Richard here. We've taken him out of his comfort zone, we've got him going quick. And you can see the bike does it goes fairly straight, but it's a little bit out of control. So now we've got George pretty much at normal riding speed. Bike's doing most of the work, he's not having to do too much, and it's fairly easy for him. That's what you're looking for, you're wanting the bike to do the work, because the bike will not get tired, whereas you will. We've got Jules here making his first appearance, perfect speed. And Joel just flowing that little bit more than he did.
Throughout the sections here, always start far enough back so that by the time you get to the beginner's guards, you stood up and you're in your normal riding position. There's nothing worse than setting off there and realise you're in neutral or something like that. So in gear, ready, so that by the time we get to the beginner's guards, we're ready for the section. Now, our first turn is a left turn, so we need to be right hand side. So all the way as close as you can without hitting it to this red. This bit's quite important for the first hard bit of the section, so we need to get as tight as we can to this blue, so it can stay as high as we can, so that then we've got the maximum amount of room possible for the turn. So we'll cut closer to here. Like I say, stay as high as you possibly can, as wide as the section will allow it, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give ourselves as much room as we can throughout the section. Ease it down gently. A bit of rain on this has made it a little bit slippy now. Now we've got a couple of choices we can do here. If you can do a nice controlled turn, we can then get on the right hand line, which will help us for the next bit. There are options that I see. So here's the first option, turning it in, again on that right hand line. The other option is a little bit of a wider turn and just coming across onto this bank. We've then got a bit more room to get onto this turn, so that's quite a good line. But something that's an alright line, but perhaps not in these conditions, you can actually come right out wide to these blues. And as long as you've got enough speed on across that camber, it will take you straight across it. But obviously, if the section deteriorates, starts getting slippy, it's not a very good line, there's a chance you can find that. This bit, we go back across to the right hand side. Something that helps us before, if we've gone tight to that tree, we've got no danger of crossing our line here. Because this bit is quite an awkward downhill turn, so we want the bike set up nice and high, so we've got enough room to ready ourselves for this turn. But once again, it's very twisty this section. If we can continue that good turn and stay high here, above that rock, we've then got the most amount of room to pop that bit as possible. Now as it is now, that moisture might carry on to those tree roots, so you want as much of a run up as you can possibly get to those tree roots. So we can go wide here, ease it down gently, head up, looking where we're going, put the power on nice and gentle, right across this left hand side, straight out to the end scars. So once again, the reason this work here that we're going to do, this hard work here, is important, because if you come down here, because you're not bothered about working too hard on that corner, all of a sudden we've got a tight turn there. By the time we get the turn, we're right at the bottom of the hill, and that'll be quite difficult from there.
Right, so we said previously we only need first gear for this because we're concentrating on the turns. We've gone a little bit too low there, which means all of a sudden the corner becomes very tight. So we're trying to make the easiest way through the section as possible to give ourselves enough run up for the hard bit. So that bit's slippy, so we need a run up for that. So next time we need to be wider to get a nice run up. I'm too tight there as well, that's suddenly become hard work. That bit I've just done is the hardest bit of the section. And then all of a sudden we've got right up to this hill and the bike's struggling to get up. So we've got a better line, we've taken more care on this bit. So we've got loads of room now, we've got plenty of time to anticipate what's coming up and then sort it out, get the power on. Got a lot more room out there and this bit hasn't quite come as tight. We're working hard on the corners to make the other bits easy. We've got plenty of run up, get the power on, straight up there, no problem. So now my head's down, not looking where I'm going, I'm at the hill, I've left it too late to get the power on, and I'm not getting up it very good.
Coming on this bit, obviously the bike wants to lean in to turn the corner, you're counterbalancing. What also helps that if you do need to get a bit unsteady, you need to put your foot down, it's this one, so it's safe as opposed to that one where it's quite a big heavy one. But as you're easing it down there, if you just pull your front brake, just so there's pressure, it will actually pull your front wheel into the bank and it can hold you upright. So from that position, the front brake's holding me upright. If I let go, it obviously moves away from me. So front brake off the roof, front brake on, then I can ease it down.
And this bit down where you're all putting it together.
Yeah, the bit I was just on about, it's a slight contradiction to what I was saying earlier on the tarmac, because I was telling you to dab on the wrong side of the bike, but on a section like this, it's the safer side that you want to, so it's getting your foot in a safe position so you're not falling off. But we've corrected all the errors, got the power on early, and it's straight up the hill, no problem. So just approaching the hard bit of the section, you need to cover your clutch here, otherwise it stalls. I mean, it's good to use your engine braking, but you need that clutch just to stop the engine from cutting out straight away so you can keep it rolling. It's just from the point where you're off the throttle and it's not quite pulling to roll downhill. So we're going to use the clutch this time. Just a tiny bit, not taking away too much of the engine braking. So we're just covering the clutch slightly so we can keep it rolling and keep the engine running. Then the clutch is out again now. So you can see my head's down. I haven't realised where I'm going. Head up, all of a sudden I've gone past the turn. So we need to make sure heads up nice and early so we can see where we're going, we can get the power on. So Katie's looking good so far. She's just gone a bit too far and all of a sudden she's made that really difficult for herself.
Is that because you wanted her to go closer to the red flag to give her more room on the next sweep?
The problem was she went up the hill too far before she started turning off to the right. Because we want, I'm just saying, just telling her now, too far forward there, and she's got not enough room for the next bit. So I need her exactly where I'm stood there instead. So there's a good foot and a half difference in the line. So all of a sudden we've got more room for the next bit. So let's see how she goes on this bit now. So up, right across to the right, and all of a sudden we've got a nice wide turn as opposed to a really tight one. Right, so just from this bit we're just letting the engine tick over and let it roll down. You see Joel puts a bit of power on, all of a sudden he's getting into trouble.
Now he had to take a different line completely at the bottom of that hill.
Yeah, once he'd had his problem, he looked up, realised where he could go, rectified the situation, did pretty well, but once again, power on at the wrong time and he's missed the turn. So you see he's a little bit heavy-handed on the front brake and the forks are dipping, it's wanting the front wheel to slide away, so that's no good. Try again. A lot gentler with the front brake. The forks are dipping a little bit, but not anywhere near as harsh as they were before, a lot smoother. You pretty much just pull the front brake in until there's a bit of resistance and you hold it on that resistance. Gentle squeeze of it.
And you need to be nice and square for the final climb out.
Yeah, aiming to get as straight as possible, as early as possible. Because obviously if you're turning it's not as easy to keep the power on, so we want it straight so we can see where we're going. So I've got Jules going on that tighter line that you noticed Joel took. that's a really good example, putting the power on. A lot of times when you're walking through the sections and you're planning your route, there is more than one option. It's down to you which option you think suits you the best. You might see 10 riders going one way and you want to go the other way. It's your decision. You can hear Richard putting the power on again. Perhaps knocked it off a tad too early, but it was still okay. You can hear George on the front brake as he's coming down here, just nice and steady, just gently pressing it on the resistance. Right, I've been a little bit naughty now, see if I can try and catch some of the riders out. I've moved the flags in to make it tighter. So she's noticed the first flag there, that's no problem. Now she's not looking very high here. She sees the red, yeah, but then all of a sudden she's too close to the blue. But that was well held, I had to do a lot of body work to recover that.
So the advice, presumably, when you're riding a multi-lap trial, is get off and look at the section every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite unlikely that the flags will move, but it's quite likely that some of the obstacles you're riding over move. If you're not going to get off and have a look, which a lot of riders don't, it's your choice, but you've got to be prepared that something might surprise you. If you're looking up as you're riding, then you can get away with it. See, Jules made excellent use of the room in the section. Working the bike quite hard. On to a slightly different angle. See, he's looking up. Just having to work the front a little bit. But then it's too late and not quite put enough power on, and all of a sudden he's in trouble. See Richard just looking down too much and didn't realise where he was in the section, and it caught him out. But then it was quite good use of the throttle to recover that situation. Obviously if he'd have just held the throttle flat out, he'd have just carried on spinning, but he knocked it off and was gentle with it. As I see Richard making slight adjustments, he's done a couple of sections, all of a sudden not happy with the biting point of the back brake, so just making a tiny adjustment.
So you can get fairly straight to that bit. The only problems you might encounter if you don't do your turn until here, then all of a sudden it's quite tight there. So head up straight front can come up in the air and that's no good. Get your control so you're counterbalancing, a little bit forward, easing it down, and then power on for the next bit. And downhill. A good wide turn so they're just going straight. You don't have to do a turn as you're going downhill. Obviously weight back as much as possible. Exaggerate.
So once again we've walked the section before we've jumped on our bikes. Very important so we know where we're going.
So we've got some banks with some cambers and turns.
Yeah, and a few little bits of uphills and downhills, so it's important. So obviously, weight slightly forward going uphill, weight slightly back going downhill. Joel just leaning back a little going up the hill, but he never really put the power on, so it didn't get the fronts, that's not a problem. And weight right over the back going downhill. I think if you start having a look at some of the top riders when they're going down steep hills in particular, they really get over the back end. I can think of a lot of riders that are almost sat on the back mudguard, bending it right down just to get the weight over the back, because they don't want any weight whatsoever on the front. You see Richard there, just moved his weight forward. If there was something in the bottom of that hill, he'd been straight over the handlebars there. There was too much weight on the front end. So we've already been working on the turns, taking our time. Front came up a little bit there, but just not a problem, just knocked the throttle off and it dropped back down again. So just taking time on the corner, counterbalancing, really put the power on there. Let's see how far he leans back. Yeah, good at leaning back as well. So arms are fairly tight together there, the arms, you're holding them fairly stiff. Not totally stiff, you need them to be slightly flexible so they can absorb bumps, but the main thing is if you hit something hard, your arms don't just give way, they're really strong. You saw Jules just leaning the bike in as he ducked underneath the tree. Wait right back. See what happens, you lean back a bit, front end comes up in the air. Right, here comes Roger. Now Roger really wasn't confident doing this section, you can tell it's in his body language as he's riding, his front wheel's wobbling a little bit too wide there, so he's still got to do a turn as he's going up the hill. It all seems hard work watching him. I've seen Roger ride before, he just needs to relax a little bit, he's a little bit tense doing this.
Right, we're going to have a look at it in slow motion then this time, Dan.
You can just see the front wheel wobbling as it's going from side to side, and it's making it hard work. It's going to tire those arms out. So if he holds his arms a little bit stiffer, so he can resist the front wheel doing that. You can see here, just shoots forward a little bit, so rather than getting straight at the hill, we've still got a bit of a turn on and again, and it's making it hard work. You see he's quite confident doing this last little bit, so all of a sudden body's relaxed a little bit, front wheel's hardly moving, it's not too much of a problem this, he knew he could do it. And confidence plays such a massive part in trials. Compare that to the start of the section, the front wheel was all over the place, it's hardly moved there.
Oh, a new rider this time, Gavin, who's an enduro expert, but pretty handy on a trials bike.
He is, you can tell he's fairly confident doing this, not really a problem. The front wheel's kept nice and straight. Fairly easy clean there.
Front, a little bit wider, don't forget to duck. You pull your front brake, I'm not on about a big squeeze, just on resistance. Ease it down, head up, looking, so then we can get straight for that bit. I think, yeah, because...
Right, we'll see Roger again. I tried to slow him down a little bit on this corner and maybe cover the brake. You can see he hasn't got his hand on the front brake at all. But I'd say that was a slight improvement. I think that's mainly due to confidence. He's done it once, knows he can do it again. And get to have another look at him. Still not going as steady as I'd like round that corner. Straight up there, no problem. And I think that's a lot better.
So we're going to look at some practical examples then of downhills, turns and climbs.
That's right, so we've got Katie International here. Weight was right back going down the hill. Nice and wide on the turn, give herself plenty of run up for the hill. Gets the power on nice and smooth, no big handfuls. Weight fairly central to keep that front wheel down. Little bit of a double blip there. Takes her time on a turn and then just eases it down to the end. Got Emma Bristow here, one of the top lady riders in the country. Tiny little bit of trick riding just to reposition a back wheel. But if you're looking what her body's doing, it's exactly what we've been talking about. So it's on quite a steep hill, so she's just letting the engine pull, but she's counterbalancing all the time, letting the bike move underneath her. Weight back, legs bent. Another example of the same section. Slightly different viewpoint of it. So he weights back on the camber there, just on the turn. Now, if you listen to the engine noise, I think we've been doing sections in first so far. This is second gear, a higher gear, but hardly revving at all. Really using the engine, letting it pull all the way up. I think if you start pulling the clutch in on this, it's starting wanting to break traction, so you can pretty much just let the bike pull you all the way up. Slightly more technical and steep hill. This might be third gear now. Basic principles are the same. I mean, he's bouncing a lot on the suspension. That's making the back wheel dig in and grip. But we're looking at an expert rider here, so he's learnt a few little tricks along the way. Weight back going down the hill. Just repositioning the bike so we can get a different approach to it. So at the minute he's been fairly good with the revs, letting the bike pull, but this bit needs more aggression to get it going. So he's really pushing down on the bike to let that back wheel dig in. Right, so he's took his foot off the footrest there. There's no weight on the back wheel, and you can see it really struggling to grip. Once again, another steep hill climb. I think this looks like a third gear section. So obviously, if we've done weight distribution on the sections, but on a section like this, it's more severe. If you're leaning back as you're going up a hill like this, there's no option but the front wheel will come up and you'll be out sitting on your bum, sliding back down. So once it's gripping, the weight starts moving forward, very low down, bending your knees, getting the weight as low as possible. We're on an even steeper hill now. Now I said weight doesn't want to be too far back, but it doesn't want to be too far forward as well, because you need some weight on the back wheel. Just letting it bite in and grip.
Quite have to do as much work. So you do the hard work there to make this bit easy, or if you make that bit easy, you have to do this bit hard. But lean the bike in, your weight needs to be counterbalancing to the right hand side, but also because it's a bit slippy, this tree route, weight further back, so we've got it on the back wheel. The back wheel wants to bite down and grip. What tends to happen on stuff like this is you spin on the route, so automatically you go forward like that, take all your weight off the back wheel and slide round. So just ease it down here. So this bit, nothing more than tick over is needed really. If you're going like that, remember that that's connected to your back wheel, so it'll make your back wheel spin like that and slide down. Because it's automatic, no matter who you are, if you spin here, you'll automatically go forward. It'll slide even more. So what we need to do is nice and smooth, carry a bit of momentum across the route so it doesn't slide. You've got a rock there, you've got two choices. You go inside it with your front wheel, your back wheel's touching these, which can make you spin. Or so a bit more confidence, come lower, wider than the rock, turn, and if needs be, help it up there just to make sure your back wheel misses everything. So for me, the easiest way to work out where you need your weight is park your bike on the camber like that. The only way to stand it up is to put weight on this foot, fix the bike up. So that's where you want your weight there, so then you can lean the bike in, just cheapen my toe on there a little bit, and that's your position. Weight back a little bit, legs bent, right over the back wheel. So like I said, the front wheel coming round there, if you look where the back wheel's going now, it's missing all the roots. I take that back, take the front wheel in there, all of a sudden the back wheel is just going to clip the edge of the roots, rocks and everything, that's where it starts to slide. In with your front wheel, you're thinking about what your back wheel's doing to make sure that's safe. Because if you lose the drive, you don't get up the hill.
So then, Dan, you've got the first job of demoing the section.
Yeah, got the power on nice and early so I can knock it off going over the roots. Turn out to the left so I can get onto this line. Just nice and gentle. Nothing more than tick over, just ease it round. Body position, leaning right back. So ever so smooth across the end bit. If you start being a little bit heavy-handed with the throttle, you can see the back wheel wants to slide down and automatically it throws the balance off. You need to start putting your feet down. So weight's too far forward and it has the same effect. It makes the back end light, makes it want to spin and slide.
So, if it does slide, chances are our first reaction is to put that foot down. Nothing really you can do about that. What you need to think about is rather than just putting your foot down, leaving it there, taking your weight off the back wheel, as soon as it's down, we're using it as much as possible, so we're pushing our weight down on the back wheel, and pushing it as far forward as we can. So from here, if I actually need a one, we're getting it going. We use it as much as possible.
So once again, power on, knock it off across the roots, and now we're just going to try the different line. So we've gone wider there, going down the steep bit, just nice and gentle, let the bike roll down, and then we start moving our weight back, and start putting the power on nice and smoothly.
So same goes on that line. See, roots aren't nice to go down because it makes the front wheel uncomfortable, makes you uncomfortable with what's happening with the front wheel. If you feel like your front wheel's sliding away, it's natural to unbalance yourself. It's important not to panic. Keep your weight back so nothing bad's happening with the front. And use this one, ease it down gently, and then put your foot back on the footrest. Back in the riding position. Carry on. Away as well. So at the minute, something I've been doing, I've been looking after the front wheel by putting my weight back, being ever so gentle with it. If you're too hard with that front wheel on something like this, it'll just wash away really easy. So I'll show you again. This bit in particular, and we're off. That's no good. I was too hard off the clutch, onto the brakes, and it just didn't want to know, slid away. Same goes for this bit. If I'm a bit heavy with the front, I'm not going to make that red flag. Red flag. So we've got to be really delicate so that we're easing it round, looking after it. Okay?
So we've got Katie here, nicely done with the power, got onto that tight line, just straighten the front wheel at the crucial point. Nice and gentle, weight moves back, counterbalances, no problem.
Okay, so we've got Jules on the beat at this time.
Takes his time, nice and gentle. And you've got to be patient going across cambers like this. Ever so patient, waits for it, just feeds in the power, very nice. Now here's Joel, who's going to be taking a tighter line on the next bit. So there's two choices to choose from. So a little bit wider there, now we've got a steeper turn across the roots, which he'll roll down, not a problem. Now gets his weight back, see how his right leg just stuck out there as he transferred his weight in counterbalance.
Back on slow motion to see that a little more clearly.
So he's just easing it down gently, settling himself down into the right position, and then he starts counterbalancing. Out comes the leg, weight goes onto the left foot.
We're back with Roger this time on the Montesa.
So he just struggled with the roots. For me, he didn't get the power on at all there. Got to the top of the hill, then all of a sudden he realised he's got a tight turn. So I'm just advising him here. Once he's up, off to the left to get him a tight turn, or from the position he's in, he's missed the tight line, so he needs to go for the other line wider. I mean, if you go for the tight line and you haven't got your approach right, there's a chance you could be going over the handlebars. Let's see Richard. A lot clearer how he put the power on there. He's done the hard work and managed to get that tight line. Just straighten his wheel at the right time. Just kept leaning a bit too long and actually pulled the bike out the turn, but recovered well. Still not quite enough power on there from Roger. I'm not quite happy about that. I just want to take the bike off him there and just stop him from going down there. Richard managed to get the tight turn in, straighten up so his front wheel was straight going down the hill. I think Roger would have carried on with the turn wheel and that wouldn't have been nice. So we're going for the tighter line now. Needs a one. It's good use of the one. But then left it too late to turn and actually never turned at all, did he? Just kept it going straight. You have to remember, I mean, the camera doesn't clearly show it, but it's quite a steep camera that, so his body, gravity wants to take him down. It's up to him to turn the bike the other way.
Richard's let Gavin back on the Montesa.
Just a bit of a turn wheel dropping down there, but not too much of a problem. You see the back wheel just slid a little bit, but he held on to that quite well. Right, I've moved the red flag, I've been naughty again. So this bit's just the same, it's the next bit. I've made it tighter at the end bit. Let's see if George notices it. Just see that red flag. A little bit too late before he decided to turn, and then all of a sudden he couldn't get going. It is a bit mean moving the flags, but it's a good way of finding out who's looking up.
The lowest you can get it turned and up there. And as well you went to lift it, keep it going all the way around. Whenever it's chugging like that, it will grip. Tight.
So let's see if Katie notices. She's seen it now. I get a telling off for moving it.
Back a bit. Come on, pull it back.
But we're stationary now. It's quite hard work to get it going again. The weight's back, just pulls the front wheel inside. So it's a little bit of a wheelie, but rather than pulling up straight, you're pulling up at an angle and it just pulls the front inside. So Julian taking his time, trying to use a lot of the room, but he actually goes too far past the red and then it's too late to bring it back in.
The advantage of not being first in the queue, Joel probably has seen what's gone before him.
Yeah, certainly if he's paying attention, which is what you need to be doing while you're sat in a queue. I mean, it's not good sat in a queue, but if you manage to get to watch other riders, you get to find things out. So the back wheel slides a little bit, but not a problem. He leans back, just lets it slide, doesn't panic, keeps his weight in the right place. Eventually it grips and goes inside nice. It's always important you're concentrating even when you're sat in the queue. And you'll notice that Jordan's blissfully unaware that we've moved the flag. It's not easy when you're in the queue with your mates and having a laugh and things like that, but now he knows the flag's moved. Weight was in the right place, but his leg's not bent, that's why the front came up. You can bend your legs, you can get the weight over the front wheel and keep it down. See, straight legs there, front wheels up, bends them, just drops down. Right, I've got to find a sneaky line. That that line that the lads was doing there was quite hard work, so I've turned it in tighter. Just explaining that, you know, it's really tight the other line. Why mess about? If you turn it tight and keep it smooth, just do that. Let the bike do the work. A lot of times you see riders going on the wrong line and loads of other people follow it. It's up to you to decide that, you know, take a risk. Is it a better line? Try it, and if it is, not a problem. So obviously you're going over the roots at a harder angle now, so it's very important you're smooth with the throttle. Remember that throttle's connected to your back wheel, so if you're doing erratic movements with your right hand, chances are your back wheel will be spinning, and it's just the same. Really good use of the engine there, just pulling up.
So you're trying to keep the engine pulling all the time, are you, even at those low revs? That's
right, just so it's basically just chugging all the way up the section. Perfect for 4-stroke to demonstrate. Just let the bike do the work, the engine will chug up there. If you think about if you've got your car stuck in the snow or something like that, the hardest bit is getting it moving. Once it's moving, if you can be smooth with the throttle, it'll start gripping and set off.
Main aim for this is maintain a bit of speed, not too fast, not too slow, nice bit of speed, enough so that if you get into trouble, you can roll it off, get your balance back, gently bring it back in again. If it's too fast, you start hitting things and it throws you all over the place. Too slow, you drop in the holes a bit more. So just nice bit of speed just to maintain going over the top of the rocks. If you're expected to do this in a perfect straight line without being off balance, it ain't going to happen. All the time you'll be trying to correct yourself. So you need to look at it, plan your line, plan an emergency line if the first line goes wrong. So look where we can go to get them back onto line and work our way up, bit by bit, nice and gentle. You're fighting it all the time. The better you get at this, the easier it'll be for you on your body. You find that all of a sudden, the better you get, the bike starts doing more of the work. If you start struggling on it, all of a sudden you'll realise that you're out of breath and you think, hang on, I'm doing all the work here, so that's what's going wrong. I didn't mention as well, body position on the bike, legs bent, arms bent to like shock absorbers like we were doing right at the start, but weight further back than normal, because if your weight's over the front end, you start hitting things, you'll start diving holes and want to throw you off. If your weight's back, the front will skip along the top of it a bit more. Some people like doing this, carrying the front off the ground. That's fine because you get the weight in the right position, but every time it drops, it's a bit dangerous what it's going to do. So if you can just use your arms to absorb the front wheel so it's not coming off the ground, so it's going like that all the time, you shouldn't have any problems with it diving in holes. Right, just move the red out a bit too tight. The main thing you've got to miss is this, either that side or that side. You've got to be quite good to be able to go up and over it, because that will hit your sump and stop you dead.
Right, it's a nice speed this. You can see the front wheel's wobbling a bit, but I'm doing a pretty good job keeping it straight. My arms and legs are acting as shock absorbers. If you remember the Kickstart man on the title screen with his bent arms, bent legs in time with the music, that's what you're looking for on here.
This section you've subtitled Lag and Lux because of the length of it. Presumably if you don't get it right, it's going to be very tiring.
That's right. I mean, whenever you've got the nice speed and nice line, it's fine, it's not tiring, but you get offline like that, like I just did there, you have to knock the power off and then it starts becoming hard work. Now I mentioned gears at the start of this film. Well, this is the only one I think might be second gear, because the speed you're going, it's pulling nice in second gear.
Is this also a case where if you've got sufficient speed, your front wheel is not dropping into any holes?
That's right, that's what you're trying to do. We've got Richard here. His style is riding slow. This is how he does really well riding slow, but I just want him to try and go a little bit faster, because like you say, when you're slow, your front wheel goes in every little hole. If you can go just a tiny bit faster, it'll skip across the top of everything. I mean, that was a lovely ride, but I'd like to say a little bit faster. Right, the thing you want to be looking at now is how little effort Joel's putting into this. The bike's doing pretty much everything. He's just standing on it, nice and relaxed, let his arms and legs take up all the bounces.
Perfect style, isn't it, that? That's great.
Right, Katie's set off, her weight's too far forward, her head's down, she's not looking far enough in front of her. She needs to be looking just past the front wheel, if not on this section a little bit further forward. And if you've got weight on the front wheel becomes heavy and wants to go in those holes. So the front wheel's heavy and that time it stops you. So what she needs to be doing is leaning back, make the front wheel light so maybe it can glide over that bit. Compare it to Joel, that looked hard work. So heads up now, she's looking a lot further forward now. Weight's further back. This section is just like a rocky stream as well, you want your weight fairly back. So this time the bit that stopped her, she leant right back, the front was light and it just floated over the gap.
So what we're showing here, Dan, from the rear view, we've got the big stone ahead.
You can just see the gap coming up, so all of a sudden she leans right back there and carries the front across the gap, making it nice and light. Right, we mentioned right at the start of the film about Jordan's knees being fairly close together. You see they're pretty much locked in one position and he's only bending his top part of his body above his hips. So in a section like this can cause him problems. For me, he's going too slow, the front wheel's going in the holes and he's doing a lot of the work.
Over the course of a trial then, that would sort of take quite a bit of energy out of you if you ride the sections that way.
Yeah, as well, definitely energy levels, but even on this section, if you think maybe the next lap he'll not do it quite as good, get the line wrong, and because he's struggling with that body position, it will cost him. Watch George's front wheel there, I think he's going a little bit too slow as well. He's got straightened up a bit, he's got a bit more speed. Once again, that looked pretty hard work. Front wheel just came up there and he had to knock it off an Abadab. Right, I thought when I first watched this that you'd speeded this clip up, but then I realised you hadn't. Yeah, I mean,
no, this is
quick.
As it happened.
Yes, it's too quick. I mean, it's effective, I'll not argue with that, but it's too quick. He is skipping across all the holes, but it's all fine. Apart from if you hit one of the rocks a bit too hard, it compresses the suspension and throws you off at a funny angle. Right, starts off good position on the bike, good speed, and all of a sudden it's starting to go wrong. Had a dab, recovered a little bit, but it's still hard work. You can tell the expression in his face is tense, he's holding it stiff and it's hard work. He's doing really well, he's keeping going. I think eventually, all of a sudden, it's a bit too much hard work, just catches you out a little bit, struggle to recover, but then we're going again. I think that's what makes a good section for me. You know, you mess it up a little bit, but you hang on, then you hang on, and then eventually you can't hang on anymore.
Right, Richard's engaged the turbo drive this time.
Right, you can see he's not really comfortable going this speed, but the bike is going in a pretty much straight line. It's skipping across everything, but as I mentioned, every now and again he'll hit something too hard and it'll catapult him off at a different line. The one thing about carrying a little bit of speed through the section, if you do get in trouble, if you miss your line, you can knock the throttle off to slow down, let your body catch up, and then recover the line, take your time, get back onto it, and then you're sorted. If you're going too slow, if you get offline, it'll just stop you, and you're in real amount of trouble there. One thing Joel did on the previous clip, he came across the gap that Katie had a bit of trouble with. He actually jumped right across it because he had carried a little bit of speed and just opened the throttle and helped the suspension. Right, we've got Jordan flexing a little bit more and carrying a little bit more speed. It's better. It's not as good as it could be, but it is better. Once again, lock knees close together. Just had a bit of a wobble in the middle. We'll just see this bit again. So gets a body lean on. His legs are fairly straight. From now, we go straight and big body lean, but hangs on to it quite well. I mentioned energy levels as well. That's taking up a lot of energy doing that. A lot easier, legs wider apart, nice and bent, absorbing all the bumps. So we've got Jules going a little bit slower. He's having to do a little bit more work than before, but I think this is a lot better. Need to find a compromise. Not too slowly, having to do a lot of work, but not too fast though it can fly off at any angle. Nice speed from Gav. I think if you compare the two rides that Richard had on the Montesa, this is the right speed, this is what you need to do. I'm sure Gav would be a lot happier going about 10 times the speed of that.
On the second one.
Right then, so the main focus on this bit is to work out what we call the double blip technique. So it's one blip to lift the front wheel up, so your front wheel lands on the object, another blip to clear it again so that your sump plate doesn't hit. These are perfectly sized, so if you're a bit lazy with that second blip, your sump plate will catch. So right, starts here, as we've already said, just back a bit and get nice and lined up for it. Now with logs, at the minute they're bone dry, so they're fairly grippy, but the general idea is you get as straight as you can with them, so that they're less likely to slide. So obviously if you were coming at this angle and it was wet, it'd want to slide in there. So we need to make sure we get square. So, fairly close to this log. It's just big enough to catch the sump plate, this. Fairly close to it, I'd say about there. Pick the front wheel up onto it and then lift it again so that you're carrying the front of the sump over there. So you're aiming almost there for your front wheel. So touch and lift and drop down. Automatically, unless you've got your weight really ridiculously over the back, there's no danger of it flipping, because as soon as your back wheel hits that, it knocks the front wheel down. So up, touch, lift, and it'll knock the front wheel down and you're back on for the next bit. Now this bit is the most important bit of this section, because that's the biggest log we've got. So you need to come over here with just the right amount of speed, not too fast, so you've got as much room as possible to set yourself up for the next log. If you come over here fast, you'll find that you're about here before you get to before you realise that all of a sudden there's a big log in front of you. So slow it down here and control it as much as possible to this log. Exactly the same technique, front wheel lift from about there, but this time it's a harder touch with your front wheel so you can really pull up. You can see where there's marks on it where it's been hitting sump plates before, so you need to make sure you carry it up and across. Right, the advantages of the double blip technique over other techniques is once your front wheel lands on there, it compresses your suspension. The natural reaction for your suspension, what it's designed to do, as soon as it compresses, it springs back up. So you're using that spring to catapult you up into the air. So that's why it helps you. The advantage over not touching your front wheel at all, because it's perfectly feasible, you could come in and just lift your wheel right over and don't touch it. It'd still go over, but you'll find that if you've got a little bit of a lean on, as you're lifting, you'll pull the wheel to that side and you'll end up going off at an angle. With dropping your front wheel on it, you get that control, so we can keep it straight and over there. Now it's fairly important, quite a big knockdown on here when the back wheel hits. It's important that we keep that front end quite tight. If you're loose on the front end, you go like that, you'll be off quite quick. So fairly strong in your arms, ready. Keep your front wheel straight. If it twitches a little bit, you can fight it and keep it straight. Roll down into here. Now the angle of this is fairly nice to you. You can pretty much let your front wheel ride up that. You don't have to lift it up and onto it. So weight back, let the front wheel come up and help it over, because we need to be ever so slow on here, as slow as we possibly can, because this is a very tight turn. So ideally, that side of the log, across to here, and like we did right at the very start, full lock turns, right the way around to here, not too far that we miss it. We need to make sure we get it just, and then we can just sneak up here with the front wheel. Once again, it's nice to you with the front wheel. It will just ride up there, across the corner. I don't think you'll be able to turn it that tight. And then this last one, nice and easy, weight back, wheelie off it, land it, and out the end. Land it, what I mean is, it's quite common once the front wheel gets up in the air, people lock everything out, hold themselves rigid, and when they land, it makes them fall over because it's quite a big bounce. You need to use your arms and legs to control that. So front wheel up in the air, be ready for it, nice and relaxed, drop it so you can cushion it a little bit and ride out. Don't catch you by surprise. Right, so just to prove that it does sump out, that's what we need to avoid. We need to make sure the front sumps up like that. So once your front wheel's there, put the power on, it'll ride down. This one stops you really big time there. That's why we need that front wheel on. Okay.
So we're nice and steady here, no big handfuls of throttle. Notice what my legs are doing every time I'm giving it a blip. I'm not using my brakes there. I'll probably be covering them, but I'm not using them. Maybe if I give it a touch too much throttle, I will just touch the brakes just so I can keep up with the bike. So just as I'm blipping the throttle, you see my legs working there, lifting the front wheel, a little bit of a pause and then the second blip. Just to make sure the sump plate clears the log. So one blip, up, and another blip, lift it again. I've just got my speed right, so like I said, I don't need to use my brakes there. Right, what we're doing now, we're just doing exactly the same, but this time I'm not touching my front wheel on the log. As you can see, it is effective, it works, so it's not a bad technique to do. It's just you do get more control by touching your front wheel on the object. You see it again in slow motion, you'll see I'm just not quite as comfortable as I was before.
But imagine when you're starting, Dan, that your immediate reaction is you mustn't hit the log with the front wheel. You'd be wanting to clear everything.
Yeah, that's right. It is very common, especially for novices, that when they're coming up to stuff like this, they'll just want to wheelie and clear it. Like I say, it's effective, so I'm not going to criticise for that. But on bigger logs, and you saw just there I had a little bit of a moment, you do need that extra bit of control that it gives you with touch your front wheel on. I think we'll see a rock step later on where you have to touch the front wheel on. Quite nice from Richard, but you did notice that as he just dropped off the bigger log, he gave it a blip and it got him in trouble, and it is still suffering because of that extra little blip now. He's hanging on, he's getting in trouble, and he just can't quite fight it long enough. It's a nice technique from Joel. He's really slowing it down so we can approach the log and then get it going as early as possible. He does well working on the approach to the log. So he wasn't too good on the turn, a little bit jerky on the clutch and the brakes, but that was still quite nice.
Yes, it's amazing just looking at last clip. Did all the logs, but then the grass, just the right hand turn, caught him out. So you can never take anything for granted, can you?
Well, no, one thing that it is as well is you're just going over the log, so your suspension's compressed, and as you start to turn it then springs back up and it just unsteadies you a little bit. Now what I did there with Katie, I just put a little rock there, which is handy when you're learning how to do this technique, just to take your front wheel off. If you're struggling lifting that front wheel, just put a little rock so that it'll compress your forks and it'll help you lift the front wheel up. See, I've still got the rock in now for Jordan, so I'll go over the first one, no problem. See the little rock just for the front wheel to lift off. One thing I've noticed looking back at the footage of Jordan and George, I mean they're both on 125 bikes, they're both using the clutch quite a lot. especially George, you can see he's a little bit revvy and on and off the clutch, it's making the back wheel spin. If I did have known that at the time, I'd have got him to try and ride this without the clutch totally. It's always good to get used to how the engine works and not be too dependent on the clutch. Right, Richard's not done quite enough work there on the turn for me. As a result, it means he's tight for that bit, and that causes the stall. The bike was struggling too much. So a little bit too much gas from Joel on the first bit, and then he had to anchor up pretty quick because he was too close to the big log.
And the wheelie out, everybody enjoys doing.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it when I was talking through the section as well with the wheelie out. Make sure you cushion the landing. You see Katie, as soon as the front wheel lands, how much work she does, just to make sure it doesn't bounce her off.
So she gathers herself up after every aspect of the section.
That's right, yeah. So over one thing, compose yourself as early as possible, and then ready for the next thing. I don't know if you notice, watch Julian's front wheel when he goes over the logs, he seems to put his front brake on. I think that's just a little bit of a bad habit. I do it sometimes as well. It's just, you can just give it a little dip of the brakes to help compress your forks, it just helps. Obviously make sure you release it after you've gone over the log, or you don't want to be going over the handlebars.
Have you slowed him down on this one a little bit now? They were still spinning the wheel there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's still on and off the clutch a little bit. See George's back wheel just spinning up. What he's doing is dipping the clutch to drop the front wheel down, but then he's dipping it too early and he's holding it dipped, he's holding his clutch in for too long, so he actually loses momentum, so he needs to let his clutch out again to go forward. Not a problem with that, the momentum was good, but you'll see more on this one. So up and over the log, that bit's alright, but then he'll clutch it too much and too early and then has to let it out again. I think George would benefit from doing it without using the clutch. See if you could practice doing that. So both George and Jordan have got good technique over the logs, they just need to work on the clutch a tiny little bit. Jordan's not quite as dependent on his clutch as what George is. I'm sure this won't be a problem for Richard, he's used to riding bikes with no clutches. Bit quick that last bit, but not too bad. I think the engine braking of the Mont just caught him out a touch there. It didn't quite roll on as a two-stroke would have. Right, what I've got Joel doing here, I've got him to balance with the front wheel on, so you can see how much body movement he has to use to generate it to get it over the log. So he really forces the suspension down, and a blip of the clutch to spring it back up again. So he's just struggling to get his balance. So quite difficult to do when you're balancing on something like this. But when he gets composed, right, you'll see him slow. Well, it'll definitely be slowly in this, but he'll push down really hard on the suspension there, and then let it spring back and give it a blip. And you see how much the bike jumps up. I mean, I don't expect a lot of people to be able to do this, but it's just showing you how much work he's putting into it.
Now this looks awkward, but you're just doing concrete blocks, but there's only a bike space between each one, so what we're looking at timing here, presumably.
That's right, perfectly spaced. There is just about a bike's length in between, but you've got the same technique, you've got the double blip technique to lift up, but as soon as your back wheel's up, you've got to drop the front wheel, compose yourself, and you're ready for the next bit. And because you're pointing down as well, it makes the lift harder. It's quite a technical little section, this bit, but it's nice when you get it right. Okay, it's not too bad there, and that's quite nice. You really want to avoid your sump plate hitting as much as possible. A little bit snatchy and a bit stop-start. It wasn't too bad. So Jordan gets the whack of the sump, and then all of a sudden it knocks him off balance and he can't recover. You see Joel just keeping it flowing a little bit more than last time, and that looks a lot tidier. So Joel's just fighting for his balance. That wasn't bad, but then all of a sudden too close to that one, and it made it really difficult for himself. You see the blocks are just big enough to catch the sump and stop you. So a little bit better with the sump there, but just loses his balance eventually. It's not as easy to balance when you're pointing downhill. So what I'm doing now, I'm just showing you how close the blocks are. I'm using my throttle, my clutch, all my body technique as much as possible here, keeping my balance. When my front wheel's touching the block, it helps with balance as well a little bit, but it shows you how tight they are. And a little bit of playtime there, just showing you leaning really far back to keep the weight over the back wheel. What I'm relying on is every time my back wheel hits the rock, it knocks my front wheel down a little bit, so there's no danger of me looping. So I'm just on there, on the right, on the point of no return, but then the back wheel hits, helps me recover a little bit, little wave of the leg. I just managed to keep it going. You watch the top riders in the world, they'll be able to probably jump between each gap of the rock, just staying on the back wheel.
Right, doing a rocky stream now. It's not quite as severe as something you might find in the Scottish, but it's a good basis for learning on. Slight difference with riding rocky streams to like the rocky hill climb we're doing over there is there's water, so it might hide some of the holes. So as you walk in the section, you're looking to see if there are any holes which your front wheel might dive in, see which bits you might need to take your weight back just so your front wheel goes over stuff. I think it's always a good starting point to have your weight further back than you would normally on a normal section, so then it should just skip across everything. So like we've already done, get a good straight run up into the start of the section, out to this side, just so that we can cut across over to the left, so it lines us up better for the next bit. A little jumble of rocks, as long as you've got a nice run over there, got a nice bit of momentum, it shouldn't be any problems for you, it should just carry straight across everything there. What you want to be looking for is like the angles of those rocks, they might just be big enough to catch the front of your sump plate, which would stop you. So you might want to, instead of what I said coming across to the left, it might be safer to come up onto this flat one so that we don't hit the sump plate on there and then get out to the side a little bit. So the more work you do there, the more room you have for that bit, in theory, making it easier for you. So yeah, nice and steady across there, calm it down, slow it down, line it up nice and early so you can attack the rock. There is just a little bit of a sneaky line missing the rock, but the angles of all those, I think footrest and footrest, I think that could stop you there. So I think the best idea is up there. As you can see, there's marks on the rock where people have been hitting the sump plate. So, as you've just been doing on the logs, come down just below the rock, lifting the front wheel onto the corner and lift again, double blip again. Straight over. Get a nice line there. A bit, just one thing that's causing problems, it's a bit too big and narrow to be going over. I think through the gap you can see on there it's catching the footrest, so what you want to be doing is head up, getting a nice approach into it and picking your line so you can just go up the inside here and out the end. Front wheel quite close to it, because if you're too far this way you'll find your back wheel is in the undergrowth there and it might take you through a one or something like that. Okay?
Like what Katie's done there, she's made sure she's got straight lined up for the section so she hasn't got any dramas before she gets to the begins guards. Very important that. Clearly heard the double blip there, that was good. The rock at the end bit, what you've got to do with things like that, you get what you call target fixation. If you see a big rock, you look at it and you head towards it, you've got to look away from the rock. George just having a one there. That was because he went a little bit too wide with the front wheel and actually took himself into trouble.
We've got rolling rock here like that. You want to be that side of it, or up there or something. Never go on stuff like that, because always do that.
So if you compare that ride to George's, which was a lot tighter and missed the loose wobbly rock, so it didn't cause him any problems. Nice technique over the rock. Still fairly stiff in the legs though. So Jules a little bit tighter to that red flag, so it avoids any problem with his front. Has to do a bit more work before the step, but that was okay, that was a nice ride. The step is slightly tapered. The closer you go to the right hand side, the bigger the step gets. I'd say Roger's a little bit too slow there. You can see he's struggling to hold his line. Strains it up good over the rocks. And didn't quite get his timing right. I'd say his weight was a little bit too far forward when he put the power on, so he didn't really get any lift.
Right where your foot is, you come up there, out wider and come up where your foot is.
We're looking for him to be slightly to the left of his position there as well.
That's right, as I was saying, that the rock's bigger the further right you go, so you need to be pretty much just to the left hand side of it. So once again, hasn't got his weight in the right position, didn't manage to get that front up.
When you put the power on, all your weight will
Roger would benefit from going back on the flat ground and practicing lifting that front wheel up. Just so you get comfortable, so you can do it without thinking too much about it. Because as soon as you start thinking too much, all of a sudden it's more difficult. A little bit better there, although it was too much throttle. His weight was better, and that's why the front came up. If you compare Roger with Katie, Katie's just a little blip to put the front wheel onto the rock, which recovered and then goes again. Roger just did one really big, long blip with the throttle, and that's why the front just went up and up and up till it was uncomfortable. But he did do well to keep control of it.
I suppose you're worried with this double blip thing that you perhaps haven't got time to do it when you're not so good.
Yeah, I think, like I say, if you think about it too much, all of a sudden it seems really, really difficult. The better you get at it, the more natural it comes, and it just doesn't worry you at all. And like I said earlier, the more confident you are, you know, it just makes such a big difference in trials. Something Richard does that I quite like is, he does the step, that's nice, but he has a little bit of a sneaky line, missing the little rock pile there. It's all fine to do that if it's in within the flags, because when we're walking the section, we're wanting to find the easiest way through the section. Richard just using his experience there, and you know, it might not make that much of a difference in a section like this, but on a harder one it can make a really big difference.
So what we're really coming back to is that all the hours of practice that you put in are giving you the time and confidence to attack these sections without too much worry.
Yeah, I think if you take yourself back when you're learning to drive, if you've already passed your test, of course that is, everything's something like hard work to do. You know, you've got your clutch, your revs, all different things with your legs and arms, and it was hard work. But now you'll just be doing it without even thinking about it. You see, Roger is pushing down on the front, pulling back, but he's just not quite got his timing right with the suspension. He was a little bit late. The suspension had come back, so he didn't get any lift. And watch where George drops his front wheel onto this now, nicely onto the top of the rock, and that's the difference, just got the confidence. So that was really nice. I just wanted to keep this little bit in. He can be a bit of a smart Alex sometimes. He's there with his clutch again, and it makes him have a one.
There's the look back as well. Did you see me drop that dab after I did the hard bit?
Perfect, just drops it onto the top of the rock. doing some drop-offs. That time I just let it ride off. The sump caught a little bit, but not too bad. My weight's very far back, my arms are strong. I'm going for a big lift to take the front wheel safe that time. And then this last time I'll do in between a little bit of a lift off just to stop the sump from catching.
The sump plate wants to hit. If you're riding over, the sump plate hits, it wants to send you over there. It's quite a big hill, you can see how quite a big rock to drop off. You can see how much it wants to send you over the front. So what we need to do from this position, carry the front enough so it doesn't catch the rock, which is there. If it caught it just at the back, if I had got my momentum, it would have gone over it. So then do it standing up. Just a little lift at the end there. Something that can help us is the rock itself. We can actually use that so we don't have to carry the front, because it wasn't nice. As I was carrying the front, it's taking me to the edge of the next rock. So what can help you is just lift it a little bit earlier and then drop it earlier, so it then gives you more room to sort yourself out for the next bit.
So I'm just going to go a little bit further left, and it gives the rocks a bit longer so I don't have to lift as much, so I can take it onto the rock and there's more room for me to go down. And now we've got quite a big drop off. I've got no option here but to do a long lift with the front wheel, really big lift like that. Look how much my body really absorbs the landing as well. But you've got to be careful with stuff like this. When your back wheels hit going over something that's not flat, it's risky, because as soon as that back wheel wants to hit, it wants to knock the front wheel down. And of course, if you're doing it on something as big as this, you're straight over the bars.
But drop-offs, they're probably one of the things that worry the beginner more than anything else, aren't they?
That's right, drop-offs and downhills, they're a beginner's nightmare. It's something that you can only get with practice. The more you do, the more confident you become. You'll notice here we've got Katie and then it's Joel just after. We only had 2 volunteers to do this, because that shows you how much people don't like it. And a lot of the riders are very capable. So Joel's a little bit apprehensive, slows it down, breaks it into 2, and then just lifts it off the last one.
Right, we're going to do a couple of rock steps now. I'd like to just focus on the one step, but we'll put this one in as well because it gets you straight at it. It's a nice angle, so it just pretty much rides up this. Now the angle of it, there's a little bit of an angle there, so if you do end up on that bit, it's very important we don't put the power on because it'll slide and turn us off that way. I like to ride over the point a bit more just to get onto the flat bit here. There's plenty of room in between here and the rock step. We started off, we've got a few kickers in just to help us, because it'll help the back wheel get up. Now, the double blip technique that we've been doing, front wheel on here, it's very important on this bit. If you didn't do it, one big lift, your front wheel would dive straight into there, your front wheel hits that, as your back wheel hits that, stops you dead, and you're probably going pretty quick, so it'll come back just as quick, and it's a crash that, so it's something we want to avoid. So the double blip technique, where we get the front wheel on, we touch, we carry it up onto the rock. Now, because the kickers are in there, it does make it ride up quite nice. What you'll find is the front wheel comes up a bit higher than what you want. We're covering the clutch. Once it lifts, at a quick dip of the clutch, drop it on and go again. I think use this as a double blip as well, so almost imagine a triple step. 1, again, and again for the 3rd time, just to stop any footrest hitting it there or anything like that. So if you're practicing something like this, it's always good to start with the kickers in if you're unsure. The better you get, the smaller the kickers appear, or even out, totally out.
Right, Katie doesn't quite take enough care for my liking and line it up. You know, she's a bit careless with the back wheel. Good on the rocks. Didn't drop the front wheel on the last rock, but that wasn't the problem because it was going. We watched Joel a bit more careful there. Gets the line better. And touches that last rock as well. The approach to this is almost as important as the step itself. I think Katie does a carbon copy here, exactly the same with the back wheel in there. This time touches the front a touch from there. Better. Right, Jules is a very strong rider. Doesn't quite get the lift that I would like. Doesn't lean back enough to take the front wheel onto the last rock. He actually goes into it. 9 riders out of 10 that would stop, but not Jules because we'll show later how strong he is with his arms. So Jordan hasn't quite got the approach to the step right. I'm just pulling him back to get straight at it so we can have a proper go at it. Now, although he's getting the approach better, he's quite close to it from here, so it's quite difficult to get up it from here. But that's not bad technique to do it from that close. Right, so George didn't quite get his line well, and he moved his weight a little bit too far forward too early, so his back wheel just spun. And then, like I say, it's hard when you get close to, but George just drifted off to the right and hasn't got it where I wanted him to go. So he was just a bit too far right, I want him to hit the middle bit. And then the last time he just misses the front wheel touch. I think just have a breather, have a go in a few minutes. Nice from Joel again, very careful on the approach and got the nice technique over the rocks.
Both Joel and Katie are hitting that little V in the rock, aren't they, every time?
Yeah, they're getting the line better, and like I say, it's very important. And Katie was quite aggressive there. You heard with her throttle how much she was giving it for the technique. That's good to have. And here we go, this is what I was on about with Jules. A little bit wobbly there, but if you watch the slow motion where his front wheel hits the second rock, very low down, but he was so strong and he fought it, and it just carried on going. He forced it up. Still not brilliant with the approach, so he has to line it up with his feet. But then once again, this is quite good technique from Jordan. Didn't get the last touch, but you saw his weight was back and kept his front end light. Right, better on the step that time. The approach still wasn't good, so it means he's very close to it, but the step was better.
With the front, drop it down soon. As soon as it's up, drop it down so you can go again.
There's Jules again. He's working harder. The front end's getting lighter now. He's trying with it. It's just not quite working. It's something that, you know, the bikes that he's used to riding, it's a technique that's a little bit alien to him. So his technique's very effective, so it's not that crucial that we change it, but it is nice just to get a different way of doing things. See, Jordan's really got the hang of it now. George just missed his timing, didn't really get a hard enough touch with the front end, so he couldn't really pull up and go again with the throttle. Once that front wheel touches, you can regain a bit of control. Finally gets it right. I think just surprised himself a little bit at the end there. See what I meant with the confidence. Different angle of the same step, and you can tell with Joel, he really broke it down. You could hear the distinct 2 blips, or 3 blips it is in this case. Front wheel wasn't quite high enough, but it wasn't bad, it was good that. You hear how much Katie's giving it. Her bike's a 250. If you compare to Jordan and George's 125, she's really making it have it. This is without the kickers in as well. You see how George's confidence has improved so much. You can now do it without the kicker. And just to prove us all wrong, Jules again without the kicker. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it with Jules.
It's a little bit more up because you're going downhill to it, but I think you've got enough room to level it out a little bit. There's a nice rise off here to take the front wheel on. So we can hit the front wheel in there, lift again, and over the rock. So as we've been doing, double blip, 1, and then go again. So touching, putting the power on, and driving up it. Okay?
Right, it's just a single rock step this time, but you're pointing downhill, so it makes it slightly more awkward. Double blip technique again. I think Joel just hung off the back of the bike and just lost his forward momentum a touch there, but his technique was good, and that's what we was focusing on. Katie just, once the back wheel was up, moved the weight forward and kept it rolling forward. Nice technique from Jordan. I really would like more aggression, more revs. George just gets his technique a little bit wrong, just his timing was out of touch. And surprising for Jules this as well, that wasn't as aggressive as what I thought it would be. I mean, we're in Katie's comfort zone here. She's really good technique, really good aggression. The bigger the step gets, the less confident she becomes, and that's what makes the difference. The technique's right, it's just the confidence. Getting better from Jules.
She looks as if she could do that all day, doesn't she?
Yeah, definitely. Once again, you compare the 250 to the 125. Jordan should, in theory, be giving it more than Katie, and he's not. So that's what's causing him a few little problems. Maybe not so much on this, but definitely on the bigger ones. We showed Joel again. So it's how much he's generating the suspension and how much he's generating that bounce to help him up the rock. So he's really pushing down, clutch in, revving up, and then letting the clutch out, and it springs him up. It's really hard to do with your front wheel on. It's not something we expect a novice or beginner to do, but it's very good to demonstrate how much work he's putting in.
Rock step, slightly bigger, but the most important thing is it's a bit back on you, it's a bit undercut, so this is where it's been hitting. You can see all the marks on there where people have done it before. So what helps you here is when you touch your front wheel on it, you've got to really pull back. We've got to pull the sump away from the rock and let it drive up. It will be tending to spin quite a bit on there until you get the technique right. You have to lean further back than what you think, because no matter what happens, as soon as your back wheel hits, it'll knock that front wheel down. What can help is start off with the rock there, let it help it ride up. That always is a bit an advantage. Once you get the knack, move the rock, have a go at the rock. Who would like to go first?
Notice with Katie, she rides it exactly the same as a smaller step, just gives it a tiny bit more. Same technique. You have no option but to touch your front wheel on this rock, otherwise you won't get up. It'll hit the sump, it'll stop you dead. And I mentioned Jordan not quite giving it enough. You saw there, the step's big enough to catch him now. If he gives it more, it'll clear the sump and it'll stop him. Right, we'll see Jules now. Once again, we did have a lack of volunteers for this. It's his first attempt, not really that confident, but hang on, did it pretty good. Just needed to work on his recovery a little bit. George really didn't want to have a go at this step. You could see the minute his front wheel touched, he was jumping off. He wasn't interested, was he?
I don't blame him. It's quite a step, is that? It's, what, a good 3 foot or more?
Yeah, like I say, it's just big enough that if you don't do it right, it hits the sump, it'll stop you dead. We started off with the rocking and we ended up, no one really wanted to go at it without the rock. Once again, we see Jordan, he's a little bit apprehensive, not wanting to attack it, and it's just stopping him. Better from Jules there. Did the step pretty much the same, but he worked harder on the recovery and he was ready for it, and once again, more confident. Now what Joel's done here is going from really close to it, and that makes it harder.
One last thing, just to finish off on, working on a bit on balancing. I'm going to give Jules the task of doing it with the straight wheel, Katie with the turn wheel, just to show you the difference it makes to have a more solid base. With your wheel turn, there's a lot more rubber touching the floor and it's a lot easier to balance. Because Jules is an excellent balancer, so we should be able to see the difference here. So when you're ready, guys. See, Katie's a bit more stable. You see Julian hasn't got a lot to work with. Do you want to turn your wheel now, Julian? The other way, probably. Just straight away, improve balancing. What I like to do when I'm doing this, notice both Katie and Jules, they've got the brakes on, front brake, back brake as well to help. The one thing I don't know if you picked up on, Katie's turning that way, I told Jules to turn and steering the other way. It's just the angle of the ground. It's turning against the ground more, and that's what helps him get balanced. Katie's got a little hump here, she can do the same on. This is something that you can practice in your garage, although it is harder on a totally flat floor. Now you can see, once you get good at that, try it non-handed. Oh, it's just struggling to recover. See who can do it non-handed. Makes it slightly more difficult because we haven't got the front brake on to hold us upright. And if you're really confident, you can try head, shoulders, knees and toes. And if you're super confident, straight back up again.
Right, we're showing you the progression of the double blip technique now. We've seen it on the smaller rocks and logs, now we're going to see it on the big logs and big rocks. See how often I use it. I'm just starting off and just showing you really close up to an undercut step, just like we had Joel doing. And now a few different obstacles where it's double blip. Quite a steep step over a tyre there, exactly the same technique, just on bigger logs and obstacles. Now we've got a big fallen tree that I like playing on, just practicing double blip every time, one blip up, another blip, lifting it over again. You see I'm staying on the back wheel a little bit longer than some of the lads did before. That's just keeping my weight on the back end so I don't have to drop the front wheel as early. A little bit of balance practice there. And we've got a few more bigger logs now. Exactly the same technique, double blip. Once you get the hang of it, it is so useful. The better you get the technique as well, you seem to do it more in your body than using the throttle. I mentioned Jordan not giving it enough. Once you've got the technique, you don't actually need to give it too much. See a slow motion, how much my body's working. A really big lift when that front wheel touches now, really big lift up.
Now Katie turned camera operator at this point because some bloke having filmed all day decided he must have a go himself. That's the whole idea, Dan, isn't it?
Yeah, we want people to have a go. We want people to have a look at trials, think they can have a go at it and get involved in the sport. We couldn't let it go without you having a go, having spent all day with us, could we?
No, good job Pidcocks weren't there to see that. Just to finish off our DVD with you, Dan, some live footage.
This is from Scotland. You can see my body's working really hard, arms and legs acting as shock absorbers, as we've been doing. Got quite a narrow stream here, very tight line to it, and then up a big step at the top. You can see it moves my weight forward as I hit it, knock that front wheel down, and then all of a sudden I'm letting it pull again. Now we're doing a downhill section here, so you'll see my weight moving over the back wheel, just drop it off an edge here, nice and smooth on the brakes, not snatchy because I don't want that front wheel to tuck under. Letting the bike pull up the hill, slight reposition of the wheel there, and I think again just down here, moving the bike a little bit around here. We've got a rock step at the end, let's listen for the double blip. Just as we've been doing. Right, hill climb now, I think I'm in third on this section, letting it pull. Keeping the momentum, so keeping the grip as well. Weight over the back and keeping it pulling again. All the time keeping it going because I don't want to stop, because as soon as I lose that momentum I'm going to start struggling. So weight back going downhill, strong arms. Slight reposition of the bike. This section was frozen, so I'm trying to be as gentle as I can with my wheels. I don't want them to start sliding on the ice. Really using my arms and legs all the time, working the bike, working the suspension, just repositioning the bike. See I'm working hard and breath's showing in the cold there. Arms and legs working shock absorbers, trying to absorb those bumps. Section from the Scottish, a little bit alien, 'cause it wasn't a rocky stream, the weather was that bad we couldn't go in them. Remembering what we were saying, I'm going as wide as I possibly can there to make the section as easy as it can for me. Double blip up the rock. Steep section now, I need a little bit of speed. Don't want to lose my momentum. Need to work hard at the end. Look how much my arms and legs are working on this, trying to absorb all the bumps. Don't want that back wheel to kick up unless I help it up myself, do it on purpose. Power on up the hill there. Counterbalancing round the corner. Weight back, going down the hill. All those little movements of the bike, I can't do those unless I'm bending my arms and legs and working the suspension. Just getting it out the end cards there. So some big dry grippy rocks now. I'm using the double blip technique, having to reposition the bike a little bit. Really using the suspension, pushing down and letting it come back up and helping it with my legs. This is at British Championship level, so we've moved on a bit from what we've been doing. Let's see a double blip on the last rock, helping it with my legs. Back into Scotland now. A lot of rocks here, so I'm having to use my arms and legs as much as possible. Notice how I'm trying to keep my back wheel on the ground. Remember, if the back wheel's up in the air, it can't grip. Back at a British Championship round, this time in Wales. Having to reposition the bike. Big double blip there, so quite a big step. Right, so I need to reposition the bike. I've got my front wheel on, so I'm going to get my weight balance. You've seen me do a step having the front wheel on. I'll do the same thing, weight back, let the clutch out and go up. A little bit offline there, didn't quite work out, but I haven't put my feet down yet. Weight back, right back, little front wheel moment, but just my weight was far enough back for it not to catch me out. Having to do quite a lot of moving the bike about with it being a British Championship round, they're always quite technical. Every little bit of movement is giving me more room in the section, which is generally what we've been trying to do. Right, we're at the Colmore now on some hillsides. Need to be fairly smooth with the throttle. You can see the mud on my back tyre. If I'm very aggressive with the throttle, it's just going to spin. Let the bike pull me up the hill and get more and more power on as I get my momentum going. More footage from the same trial. Tight turn here, that to move the bike around a little bit, but this now I got it going. Let the bike pull, helping it up. I don't want it to kick off, so I'm trying to help the bike grip as much as possible. Weight as far back as I dare. Ease it down across the camber. From the Scot, my arms and legs are working hard. My weight's a lot further back than normally because I haven't walked this section, because it's a rare event as the Scot where you don't walk the section, so my weight was far back just in case there were some nasty holes that could catch me out. Another British Championship round. My backside actually touched the mudguard there, that's how far back I got as I dropped off. More repositioning of the bike, just checking where my back wheel is. Struggling with the balance, but I'm back to that technique that we've already seen when I'm starting with my front wheel on. So you see the body movement, back and then forward when I let the clutch out. So this is at expert level. You know, it's a British Championship round, but the same principles apply that what we've been saying.
So Dan, I think what we've learnt is keep practicing and enjoy your trials.
Absolutely, my two favourite principles, practice and enjoyment.